Hi everybody, today we are going to continue our journey through modern presidents. We are up to Ronald Reagan, who served from 1980 to 1988. On this slide, you see a list of things you should be able to explain when you are done listening to this lesson. You should be able to explain Reaganomics. You should be able to explain the end of the Cold War. You should be able to explain the major social aspects of the Reagan presidency and the Iran-Contra affair. Let's take a moment to discuss social changes and social reform. We definitely have some good and some bad during the Reagan presidency. By the 1980s, we are beginning to see some of the benefits of the work of the civil rights movement. We are beginning to see African Americans elected to prominent positions. For example, Atlanta will elect its first African American mayor. We are beginning to see more African Americans showing up to the polls. In this very top picture, you see President Reagan signing the bill that made Martin Luther King's birthday a national holiday. Beside him, all the way to the left, you see Martin Luther King's widow, Coretta Scott King, who was present at the signing. Let's kind of talk about something not so good for a moment, and that is AIDS comes to the United States beginning in the 1980s. And one of the things that Reagan is criticized for is not taking the AIDS epidemic seriously enough. And a lot of historians feel that that is because, at the beginning at least, AIDS primarily affected homosexual men and IV drug users. So that's kind of one of the chief critiques of the Reagan presidency. Reagan has the opportunity to appoint several conservative justices to the Supreme Court, including the first female justice, who you see pictured on the bottom right. Her name is Sandra Day O'Connor. One of the things that I was a child when Reagan was president. One of the things that I most remember from his presidency was the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger on January 28, 1986. Up to this point, the United States had not lost any Americans in space. The Space Shuttle Challenger exploded just after it had lifted off from the launch pad in Florida. The country was paying a lot of attention to this particular shuttle mission because there was a teacher on board. Her name was Krista McAuliffe. She was supposed to go to space and do all kinds of science experiments, and she was supposed to do essentially video conferencing with school children. So a lot of people were paying attention to this mission. The next slide has a little video just about the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. So just to kind of finish with the Space Shuttle Challenger, one of the things that historians typically look at as one of Reagan's real strengths was his ability to communicate to the public. When he went on television the night of the Challenger incident, he almost gave a eulogy for the 7 astronauts that were on board, and it kind of helped people feel like they had a way to honor those people and that he was really good at kind of letting people know that it was going to be okay. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit and focus on this particular slide, which is about the Iran-Contra affair. We're doing a lot of like pros and cons today of the Reagan presidency. So his handling of Challenger was definitely a pro. The next thing we're going to talk about, Iran-Contra, was definitely a con. Okay. Couple of foreign policy things happening here that are rooted in the Cold War. There were some American hostages being held in Lebanon. And there was a rebellion against a left-wing government. They were called the Sandinistas, which controlled Nicaragua. We're in the Cold War. Left-wing is called for communist, okay? Reagan tries to get Congress to provide military aid to the rebels that were fighting this communist government in Nicaragua. Congress refuses, and furthermore tells the Reagan administration, like, you are not to get involved in this. We are specifically telling you, you cannot do this, okay? The administration essentially ignores this, and in 1985, they make kind of a 3-way deal, okay? So follow me here, all right? Congress had specifically told the administration that they were not allowed to directly support these rebels in Nicaragua. So here's the plan. The administration makes an agreement to sell weapons to Iran. Why does Iran need weapons? We don't get along with them, right? Iran is fighting a war with their neighbor, Iraq, okay? Iran is going to purchase these weapons, In return, they are going to help us negotiate for the release of our hostages in Lebanon. Iran is then going to take the money that they received, and they are going to give that money to the Contras who are fighting against the left-wing government in Nicaragua. So we got a three-way thing going, okay? We pay Iran. Iran helps us get our hostages. They send the money to the Contras in Nicaragua, okay? Congress gets wind of this, and they are super upset because the Reagan administration went directly against what they were specifically told they were not allowed to do. Okay, it also goes against Reagan's repeated vow that the United States did not negotiate with terrorists. All right, here's the thing. All right, we don't have any direct information that Reagan or Vice President George H.W. Bush gave these orders or had any direct involvement in orchestrating this three-way trade. Okay, the guy you see on this Time magazine cover, Oliver North, he's the guy that takes the fall. All right. Here's the criticism that a lot of historians have. If Reagan truly, legitimately did not know about what was happening, he should have, okay, as the commander-in-chief. Reagan had a very hands-off management style, so a lot of historians could believe that perhaps he actually did not know what was going on, but is that a good thing? So it makes him look like he's not directly in control. Okay, so, Reagan, there's no impeachment, there's nothing like that, okay? Oliver North is ultimately the one that's going to take the fall here. Okay, let's talk about ending the Cold War, which is another big thing from this time period, and then I promise I will stop talking, okay? 1985, the cracks in the Soviet Union are becoming clear, okay? While the Soviet Union was this powerful presence in like the 40s and 50s and into the 60s, that is starting to decline by 1985 when Mikhail Gorbachev becomes the new leader of the Soviet Union. You see him pictured here. There are lots of problems. A lot of them revolve around the Soviet economy, which in a lot of ways had not been updated since the 50s and 60s. Gorbachev, I've actually heard him speak before. He came and spoke at UGA when I was a student. He kind of understood that there was a big time problem happening here, and then if some changes weren't made, then the end of the Soviet Union was likely near. So he institutes a policy called Glasnost, which is openness. It's going to allow for some open criticism of the Soviet government and allow some steps towards freedom of the press. So for the first time, you're going to be able to do some open criticism of the Soviet government. Some, not all, okay? The next policy is called Perestroika. This was a restructuring of Soviet society. Remember how communism works, okay? Under communism, the government controls not only politics, but they also control the economy, meaning there's no private businesses. The government owns everything. He's going to roll that back and allow for the beginning of some private enterprise. Unfortunately for him, it is really too little too late. So what this leads to is a crack that is ultimately going to create a split of the Soviet Union. There's this wave of nationalism. Remember, there are millions upon millions of people within the Soviet Union who are not Russian, and a lot of them don't want to be a part of the Soviet Union. So in December of 1991, 14 of these non-Soviet republics, okay? So we're talking about all of these people that ring around the sides of the Soviet Union, okay? These countries are going to start to break away and declare themselves to be independent nations. This is essentially the end of the Soviet Union, 1991. This is when the Soviet Union is going to go back to being Russia, okay? Eventually, Gorbachev is going to have to resign, and that's pretty much the end. Okay, this is all coming on the heels of the collapse of communist regimes in Eastern Europe. We talked about those satellite nations after World War II. So, your Poland and Romania and Hungary and Czechoslovakia, all of these Eastern European nations are also going to cease to be communist. And the real sign of the end of the Cold War is the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9th, 1989. Okay, my husband's mother is German. He remembers this as a huge deal in his house. His parents got out a bottle of champagne and they more or less had a party in their living room. It was a big deal. Okay, so the next one, there's one last slide. It's just a short video of a news report from the fall of the Berlin Wall. Okay, sorry this got really long. I'm going to try to make the quiz easy so it doesn't take you very long. Okay, if you guys have questions, please let me know. Thanks.